I was inspecting a general's office when a photo of a young girl on his desk caught my eye. My heart stopped. I knew that face. She'd grown up with me in the orphanage back in Texas. I quietly said, "Sir, I knew this girl once." His face went white as he stammered. You mean my missing daughter? What if a single photograph could rip your entire world apart? What if it exposed a devastating lie, a decades-long injustice, right in the heart of the military? I never thought I'd find myself at the center of such a raw, gut-wrenching mystery. But there I was, Major Sarah Collins, conducting a routine inspection in a general's office. It was a normal morning, light slicing across his mahogany desk, reflecting off metals and polished brass. Standard procedure. Nothing personal. Until my eyes landed on it. A photograph. A little girl, maybe 6, with bright brown curls and blue eyes, so familiar they stole the air from my lungs. The world went silent. My inspection folder slipped, scattering papers across the pristine carpet. My throat felt like it was closing up. I stumbled closer. The silver frame had one word engraved, Emily. She was smiling, clutching a small stuffed marine bear. My heart hammered, a frantic drum drowning out the office clock. "Something wrong, Major Collins?" The general's voice cut through the silence, sharp, controlled, but with an edge of caution. I swallowed hard, turning to face him. "Sir," I choked out, pointing a trembling hand at the picture. This girl, this child in the photo. Even after years of training, I couldn't stop the shake. He stepped forward, curiosity turning to tension. "What about her?" His eyes widened as I spoke the words that would change everything. "She lived with me. In the orphanage. In Texas." The color drained from his face. His lips parted, trembling, before he whispered, "You mean my missing daughter?" He looked at me like I just pulled a ghost from thin air. I was a Marine, trained to face chaos, to stand firm against any threat. But in that moment, the silence between us was heavier, more terrifying than any battlefield I'd ever known. That morning had begun, so mundanely. Coffee at 0600, uniform pressed sharp enough to cut, my inspection orders folded perfectly in my pocket. I was assigned to Fort Hood for a 3-month internal audit, new department every week, new report every Friday. Professional distance, that was the code. Keep emotion out of the job. But life, man, life just laughs at your rules. General Robert Alden. The name itself commanded respect. He was a legend across the Corps, a man of perfect posture, precise words, the kind of leader who could silence a room just by existing. I'd admired him, even looked up to him from afar, back in my cadet days. Now, I was in his office, shaking like a raw recruit. He motioned for me to sit. "Tell me exactly what you mean, Major." I took a deep, shaky breath. "Sir, the girl you called Emily, when I knew her, she was Lily. We grew up together, at St. Mary's Orphanage in Waco. She was about my age, maybe a little younger. She came there when we were both 6. I saw his jaw clench. How can that be possible? Emily was taken from a park in Dallas 20 years ago. She was 4. I met a stunned gaze. Then she must have been found, sir. Found and renamed. Neither of us spoke for what felt like an eternity. The ticking of the wall clock was merciless, echoing the frantic beat of my own heart. The general finally walked to the window, his reflection ghostly against the harsh Texas sun. "I searched for years," he said, his voice barely a whisper. "Private investigators, military contacts, federal channels, they found nothing. My wife died thinking she was dead." He turned back, his eyes wet, but somehow steady. "And now, you tell me she lived?" I nodded slowly, a lump in my throat. "I can't be sure, sir, not 100%. But those eyes, I'd stake my life on it." He exhaled, a long, ragged sound, trying to steady himself. "Tell me about her. What do you remember?" So, I told him everything. About Lily's soft voice, her quiet, almost shy laughter, her habit of tracing airplane shapes in the dust on our dormitory windows, how she'd hum old hymns to comfort the younger kids when they cried at night. And then I mentioned it. She had this tiny crescent birthmark near her neck. His hand flew to his chest, as if a physical pain had just pierced him. "Emily had the same mark," he whispered, utterly broken. The general sank heavily into his desk chair, All authority evaporated, replaced by raw grief. "Major Collins," he said, his voice strained, "if you're right, if my daughter was alive all these years, then someone kept her from us." His tone hardened, a steel edge returning. "And I intend to find out who." I hesitated. "Sir, with all due respect, this might go deeper than either of us can imagine. Adoption files, sealed transfers, it won't be easy." He looked up, his eyes meeting mine. "You're a Marine, aren't you?" "Yes, sir." "Then we do not quit when something isn't easy." That sentence, simple, firm, it ignited something inside me I hadn't felt in years. Not just anger, but a burning, righteous determination. When I left his office, the sun outside felt scorching, the air thick with unspoken secrets. I walked across the base, trying to steady my thoughts, my boots hitting the pavement in perfect rhythm. But my mind, it was replaying that photograph over and over. Could it truly be her? Lily, the girl who'd shared her half of a peanut butter sandwich when my stomach ached. The one who'd whispered, "Someday, we'll both get out of here." I remember the last time I saw her. We were 12. I was being adopted by a family in Dallas, promised a brand new start. She'd hugged me so tight, tears streaking her little face. "Write to me," she begged. I promised I would. I never did. Duty had carried me far from that orphanage, Texas to Okinawa, Okinawa to Quantico. But guilt travels faster than any deployment. And now, 2 decades later, her face had found me again. Smiling. From a frame. In a general's office. That night, sleep was a cruel joke. I sat in my quarters, staring at the faint reflection of the moon on my medals. They felt lighter somehow. Emptier. I'd always believed the Corps taught me everything about loyalty, about courage. But now I understood. Some battles aren't fought for your country. They're fought for the truth. And sometimes, that truth waits in silence for years, like a forgotten photograph on a desk, until someone dares to look closely enough to see what's been lost. The next morning, my fingers flew across the keyboard. St. Mary's Orphanage, Waco. Enter. The mission had begun. The next morning, I was at the base before sunrise. The air was thick with the smell of wet asphalt, the American flag above headquarters, fluttering like a weary sigh. I'd spent the whole night sifting through every memory of Lily I could grasp, the careful way she'd line up her crayons, the soft hum when she was scared. I needed to be absolutely certain this wasn't some cruel trick of memory, some wishful resemblance. When I entered the general's office, he was already there, standing by the window. He looked like he hadn't slept either. His uniform was flawless, but his eyes, man, they were etched with exhaustion. "Major Collins," he said, his voice hushed. "Close. The door." I did. He gestured to a chair. "You said you knew my daughter as Lily. Tell me everything. From the beginning." I sat, hands folded in my lap, feeling like a recruit before a disciplinary board. But this wasn't about discipline. This was about raw, crushing pain. "She came to the orphanage when I was 6. I started, my voice soft. She didn't talk much at first. The sisters said they found her near a gas station outside Waco. Didn't know where she came from. No last name. They called her Lily because of a flower stitched on her jacket." The general stared down at his clasped hands. "Emily loved lilies," he whispered, his voice cracking. "She used to pick them for her mother every Sunday after church." That silence again. The kind that fills a room like a cold fog. "She was the kindest kid there," I continued, memories flooding back. She'd fix other children's broken toys, always shared her food, stayed up late to comfort the ones who cried at night. The staff said she'd been through something traumatic, but she smiled anyway. That's what I remember most. Her smile. Through everything. The general rubbed his temples, a gesture of profound weariness. "I spent 20 years wondering if she was alive. And you're telling me she was smiling in an orphanage 3 hours away." There was no accusation, only devastating heartbreak. "I didn't know, sir. I swear I didn't know who she truly was." He nodded slowly. "Of course you didn't. You were a child." Then his eyes lifted to mine, sharp and focused once more. The commander was back. "Do you still have any contact with the orphanage?" "I haven't been back since I joined the Marines, sir. But I can go." He exhaled deeply, a sound of surrender and resolve. Do it discreetly. No press. No official channels. If someone hit her, I don't trust the bureaucracy to tell me the truth. I hesitated. Sir, I'll need authorization. I'll take care of the paperwork, he cut me off. You take care of finding out what happened. I gave him a short, crisp nod. Yes, sir. He walked to his desk, pulled out an old envelope from a drawer, and handed it to me. Inside was a faded photograph. Him, his late wife, and a tiny girl clutching a toy airplane. Keep this, he said quietly, in case you need confirmation. I studied the photo. Those eyes. Unmistakable. Blue-gray, with that same earnest spark. Lily's eyes. When I left his office, the entire base seemed quieter, like even the air was holding its breath, listening. I drove away from Waco, the dusty brown folder riding on the passenger seat beside me like a silent, accusing companion. Every few miles, I'd glance at it, brown edges curling, the word confidential stamped in angry red ink across the top. I'd handled classified intelligence in combat zones, decrypted orders in blackout conditions, even read casualty lists that could break the hardest heart. But nothing felt heavier than that thin file. The highway stretched wide and endless under the Texas sun, flat fields blurring into the horizon. With every passing mile, I felt like I was driving deeper into my own past. When I joined the Marines, I promised myself I'd never look back. I buried St. Mary's. I'd buried Tessa. I buried every lonely night in that dormitory with its peeling paint and creaking beds. Duty gave me a new name, a new spine, a new life. But life has a brutal way of dragging your history back into the light when you least expect it. By the time I reached my quarters at Fort Hood, it was nearly dusk. I didn't even bother turning on the lights. I just sat at my desk, opened my laptop, and began typing in what little information I had. Case ID 77HC. Houston Foster Care Program, 2006. Nothing. No digital record. No archived file. It was as if Lily, or Emily, had vanished twice. I fired off a message through a secure military channel to an old contact, Captain Elena Brooks, now working in the JAG office at the Pentagon. Need access to restricted relocation archives, 2006, code 77HC. Possible military involvement. Quiet request. 5 minutes later, her reply pinged back. You realize this could be above your clearance level. My response was instant. Then find someone whose clearance is higher. I hesitated before hitting send, my finger hovering over the button. But then Lily's face flashed to my mind, smiling, trusting, utterly unaware of the world's cruelty. I hit enter. This wasn't just a military investigation anymore. The next morning, I drove straight back to the orphanage. I wasn't finished with St. Mary's. Not by a long shot. Sister Agnes was outside, tending to a small rose garden by the chapel. The air was a mixture of soil, Lily's old paint, and the phantom scent of memory. Back so soon? She asked, straightening with a groan. I need to look through old storage, I told her. Boxes, receipts, letters, anything from 2006. She hesitated for a moment, then nodded. Follow me. The storage room was in the basement, where the air was thick with mildew and the ghosts of forgotten prayers. We navigated between stacks of old toys, broken furniture, and boxes labeled with years. I found the one marked 2006 to 2007 and started digging. Deep inside, among yellowed papers and brittle folders, I found it. An envelope labeled Metropolitan Social Relief Program Emergency Evacuation Order. Stamped boldly at the top corner, U.S. Department of Defense Temporary Relief Initiative. The date matched the year Lily was transferred. I opened it carefully. Inside was a list of names, birth years, approximate locations. Most were smudged, almost illegible. But one line was chillingly clear. Child ID 217L, FEMA Relocation Guardian Request Pending. Next to it, a faint signature. The ink had bled, but I could still make out part of it. M.O. Matthews. The name meant nothing to me yet, but something about the handwriting felt military. Precise. Deliberate. Sister Agnes leaned over my shoulder. We never saw those papers, she said softly. They just showed up one day. With the men who took her. The men. I pressed. Yes. 2 of them. Both in uniform. They said she was being transferred for her safety. I stared at the paper, a cold dread coiling in my gut. Safety from what? She shook her head. They never said. That night, I sat in my car outside the orphanage. Engine off, lights dimmed. The town was quiet, only the hum of cicadas and the distant rumble of an occasional truck. My phone buzzed. Elena. Got something. Relocation order code 77HC processed through Defense Logistics, Colleen. Handled by Colonel M. Matthews, U.S. Army, retired 2010. Address attached. Proceed carefully. He's well connected. I stared at the screen. Colonel M. Matthews. That name. It felt like a locked door, and I'd just been handed the key. I copied the address. A suburb of Georgetown, about an hour from base. I should have waited for authorization. I should have filed a report, gone through proper channels. But this wasn't an official mission anymore. This was personal. And personal missions don't wait for permission. The next morning, I shed my uniform. Civilian clothes today, jeans, a gray t-shirt, my old leather jacket. The Texas heat was already a beast by 0900. I parked across the street from a neat, single-story home, manicured lawn, a proud U.S. flag. Fluttering from the porch. The kind of place that looks utterly ordinary on the outside, but you just know it holds secrets, ghosts inside its walls. Colonel Matthews answered the door himself. Late 70s trim, still carrying himself with that unmistakable soldier's bearing. His handshake was firm, but chillingly cold. Major Collins, he said, a hint of suspicion in his voice. I retired years ago. What's this about? Relocation orders, I stated evenly. 2006, Texas region. A program that involved a little girl from Waco. He frowned, pretending to search his memory. You'll have to be more specific. Case ID 77HC, I said, watching his face like a hawk. His pupils contracted. Just a flicker. But it was enough. Never heard of it, he replied, already stepping back, ready to close the door. Now, if you'll excuse me. My boot was in the way. Firmly. Sir, I'm not here to cause trouble. But I think you know exactly what I'm talking about. He glared at me, his old soldier's pride bristling. You're out of line, Marine. Maybe. I shot back. But I've buried too many truths in the name of following orders. Not this one. For a heart-stopping second, I thought he'd slam the door right in my face. Then his shoulders sagged. Defeat. He motioned me inside. The living room smelled faintly of cigar smoke and lemon polish. Framed commendations lined the walls, photos of a younger Matthews with generals and senators. He poured himself a drink, his hands trembling just enough for me to notice. That file should have stayed buried, he muttered, his voice raspy. So it exists, I said quietly. He looked at me over the rim of his glass, his eyes world-weary. You're chasing something that will break a lot of people if you dig too deep. Was it your idea to move her? I pressed. He sighed. No. Orders came from above. Said it was for national security. National security? I almost laughed, a bitter, hollow sound. She was a child. Matthews's eyes hardened, a flicker of his old military discipline returning. Not my decision. My job was to follow through. Whose decision then? He hesitated. The request came through a classified channel, marked with an old defense seal. Office of Strategic Infrastructure. You'll find nothing online. They made sure of that. He refilled his glass, then said, almost to himself, that girl. She looked scared when they took her. Kept asking for someone named Tessa. I froze. Tessa. My name. That was me, I whispered, the words catching in my throat. He turned toward me, eyes narrowing. Then you already know too much. Before I could respond, he took a long drink, set the glass down with a thud, and whispered, Be careful who you serve, Major. Some commands come from men who've forgotten what honor means. I walked out of that house, my pulse hammering in my ears. The sun outside burned my skin, but inside I was ice cold. I had my first real lead, and my first enemy. By the time I got back to base, the Texas sky had turned the color of gunmetal. The air was thick, restless, pregnant with the smell of coming rain. I parked near the hangars, sat in my car for a moment, and just let the engine tick down to silence. My mind, though? My mind was louder than the thunder already rumbling over the horizon. Colonel Matthews's words echoed. Some commands come from men who've forgotten what honor means. That was a warning, a heavy one. And I knew it. In the Marines, warnings like that don't come from fear. They come from guilt. I opened my laptop and started cross-referencing everything. His service years, the FEMA relocation program, the Defense Logistics Division. Buried deep in an old, dusty database, I found it. A memo, tagged Confidential Infrastructure Recovery Operations, July 2006. The signature line read M. Matthews, DLD. But underneath, 3 initials caught my eye. HV. I didn't need to guess who that was. My own father had spoken that name before he died. Harold Vance. Now a powerful Undersecretary of Defense, once a major stationed right here in Texas. He and Alden had served together early in their careers, but their paths had split sharply. Alden took the moral route. Vance took the political one. If Matthews had been taking orders from Vance, this went far beyond a misplaced orphan file. This was something darker. I picked up the phone and called General Alden. Sir, it's Collins. You found something. His tone was steady but tight, like a wire pulled too hard. Yes, sir. A Colonel Matthews handled a 2006 relocation order. He claims it came from an upper channel, something called strategic infrastructure. Silence. A long, chilling pause. Harold Vance. His voice was flat. You knew. I suspected, sir. He's still in Washington. Do you think he'd risk exposure now? Men like Vance don't see risk, Alden said grimly. They see leverage. He exhaled slowly. Listen, Major. This stops being an inspection now. This is intelligence. You tread carefully. I'll reopen my daughter's case quietly, through personal channels. Yes, sir. After the call ended, I stared at the phone in my hand. Intelligence. That word changed everything. Because in my world, intelligence meant shadows, power, and the kind of secrets that swallowed people whole. The storm broke, just after midnight. Rain hit the barracks roof like gravel. Sleep was impossible. I opened the old folder again. There, beneath the paperwork from St. Mary's, was something I hadn't noticed before, an unmarked envelope wedged between the pages. Inside, a single sheet of yellowed letterhead. Department of Defense Emergency Operations Division. It was a memo addressed to Colonel Matthews. Subject, reassignment of minor ID 217. No. Directive, proceed under civilian cover. No further record to be maintained. Authorization code HVDX OPS. No name. No signature. Just those arrogant initials again. I felt the hair rise on my neck. Whoever HV was, he had the power to make a child vanish without a trace, and the sheer arrogance to sign it like a stamp of ownership. I scanned the document, encrypted it onto a flash drive. Then I did something reckless. I called Captain Elena Brooks again. Elena, I need a favor. You already got one, she said dryly. What is this really about, Sarah? A child. A missing girl. A cover-up tied to a defense project from 2006. A pause. You're talking about a ghost program. Then tell me how to find a ghost. Carefully, she said, her voice dropping. And quietly. I'll run your memo through an old clearance pathway. But if you're right about Vance, you could be putting a target on your back. I've had worse. After the call, I sat there listening to the rain. I should have felt fear. Instead, I felt calm. Focused. The same still, quiet resolve I used to feel just before stepping into a combat zone. Only this time, the enemy wasn't across a desert. He was behind a desk. The next morning, I met General Alden again. He looked different. Tired. Yes, but steadier. There was a new light in his eyes. Something that hadn't been there before. Resolve. I handed him the flash drive. Sir, this is the memo that links Matthews directly to Vance. He plugged it into his laptop, scrolled through the scanned image, and went visibly pale. Authorization code HVDX OPS. He used an operational seal that was shut down in 2004. He explained, his voice tight. Meaning, he revived a dead program under a fake directive. No oversight. No accountability. He leaned back, rubbing his temples, a sigh escaping him. You understand what this means, don't you? If this comes out, it'll shake half of Washington to its core. With all due respect, sir, I said quietly, I don't care about Washington. I care about Emily. He looked at me, a flicker of pride breaking through his exhaustion. You sound like her mother. He stood, walked to the window. You've done enough. Let me handle it from here. I shook my head, my resolve unyielding. Sir, you can't do this alone. Whoever covered this up still has resources. We need hard evidence. Proof she was transferred, not just lost. He turned, his voice low but fierce. What are you suggesting? Let me talk to Matthews again. This time off the record. He hesitated. If you push him, he'll push back. I'm a Marine, sir. I know how to handle pressure. 2 nights later, I found myself driving back to Georgetown. The neighborhood was eerily quiet, porch lights glowing like watchful sentinels. I parked a block away, waiting until the street was deserted before walking up to Matthews's house. When he opened the door, I saw it, a flicker of pure fear in his eyes. He knew why I was there. Major Collins, he said, his voice rough. You should have stayed out of this. Too late, I replied. I found the memo. He froze. Then you know what it means. I know it means someone used your authority to cover up a kidnapping. He shook his head violently, a desperate gesture. You don't understand. That order wasn't mine. I was told to sign it or lose everything. My pension. My record. They said the girl was under federal protection, that her father was compromised. I looked him dead in the eye. Her father was a Marine general, sir. Not a criminal. Matthews's hardened expression finally cracked. I didn't know that. I swear I didn't. He sank into his chair, trembling. I thought I was helping a child, not burying one. I pulled out my small recorder, setting it on the table. Say that again. He stared at the blinking red light, a grim, humorless twist to his lips. You think a confession will change anything? Vance still sits in D.C. untouchable. People like me, people who followed orders, we're the ones who pay. Then help me make him pay. For a long moment, he didn't move. Then quietly, he nodded. You'll find what you're looking for in Logistics Archives, Houston Branch. Box 47C. I can't get you in. But you can. You still wear the uniform. He pushed a folded piece of paper across the table. A key card. It'll work once. Don't come back here after you use it. I stood. Thank you, Colonel. He didn't look up. Don't thank me, Major. Just pray I never have to see that little girl's eyes again in my sleep. Outside, the rain had stopped. The moon sliced through the clouds like a silver blade, and the air smelled of wet earth and second chances. As I slid behind the wheel, I held up the key card against the dashboard light. One use, one chance, and maybe, just maybe, one step closer to the truth. By the next morning, the Texas sky was washed clean, smelling of dust and wet cedar. I'd barely slept, running on pure coffee and adrenaline, preparing to head for Houston. But first, I had to see General Alden again. He deserved to know what I was walking into. When I stepped into his office, he was standing at attention by the window, staring out at the parade field. Sunlight caught the silver streaks in his hair. For a moment, he looked less like a general and more like a father waiting for news he was terrified to hear. Sir, I said quietly. He turned. Collins, you look like you've been through a war. Maybe I have, sir. I placed the key card on his desk. Matthews gave me this. It's for the Logistics Archives in Houston. Box 47C. He said that's where the real records are about Lily, or rather, Emily. Alden's jaw tightened. He talked. He was scared, sir. Said the order wasn't his. He signed under pressure. The general studied the card for a long, heavy moment. Pressure from Harold Vance. It wasn't a question. Yes, sir. Matthews admitted it. He nodded slowly, as if confirming a suspicion he'd carried for years. Vance always had power. Friends in high places. Senators, defense contractors, lobbyists. The kind of men who believe loyalty is a currency. I hesitated. Sir, with all due respect, why would anyone target you? Why take your daughter? He took a long, shuddering breath and sat behind his desk. You ever make an enemy out of the wrong man, Major? Plenty, sir. He gave a small, humorless laugh. Then you'll understand. He opened a drawer and pulled out a weathered folder. Inside, newspaper clippings, photocopies, and one yellow typed letter. He pushed it toward me. Read that. The letter was chillingly direct, signed only with the initials HV. Step down from command, or your family will pay. I looked up, startled. Sir, I received that the week before Emily disappeared, he said quietly. At the time, I was overseeing an investigation into defense logistics contracts, specifically Vance's unit. I found proof of procurement fraud, millions in unaccounted funds. I planned to take it to the Inspector General. He looked past me, his eyes unfocused, haunted. 2 days later, she was gone. The police thought it was random, a child abduction from a park. But I knew better. I set the letter down carefully. You think Vance retaliated? I don't think, Major, he said firmly, his eyes burning with renewed anger. I know. The room went utterly still, save for the soft hum of the air conditioner. He continued, his voice lower now, raw with decades of grief. My wife, Claire, she never forgave me. She blamed my career, my pride. She thought if I'd left the Corps, we could have been a normal family. She was right in a way. I buried myself in work. When she passed 5 years later, I buried myself even deeper. His hands trembled slightly as he poured himself a glass of water. I've carried that letter every day since. A reminder that some victories come too late. I swallowed hard, my own throat tight. Sir, if Vance is behind this, he didn't just destroy your family. He corrupted the very institution he swore to serve. He looked up sharply. And now you see why I've stayed quiet. The Corps is built on honor, but honor can't survive scandal. If this comes out wrong, it'll tear through command like wildfire. Careers will end. Recruits will lose faith. Sir, with respect, I said gently, the truth deserves daylight even if it burns. He studied me for a long moment, then smiled faintly. You remind me of Claire. She had that same fire. For a long time, neither of us spoke. Then he said quietly, do you believe Emily's alive? Yes, sir. I've seen too many impossible things to believe otherwise. He nodded slowly. Then find her, Collins. Not for me. For her. She deserves to know who took her life from her. He stood, buttoned his uniform jacket, and extended his hand. I rose instinctively, about to salute, but he shook his head. Instead, he reached across and gripped my shoulder. You've done more for me in a week than a dozen investigators did in 20 years. I'm grateful. Just doing my duty, sir. Not just duty, he said, his eyes filled with a deeper emotion. Something more. On my way out of headquarters, I stopped by the memorial wall, names etched into stone. Marines who'd fallen in service. I ran my hand over the names, remembering faces I'd known and those I hadn't. Each name was a story unfinished. Emily's story wasn't finished either. Back in my car, I thought of Matthews's trembling hands, of the forged directives, of Alden's haunted stare. Power, pride, corruption. It all seemed so far from the values we swore to defend. But then again, isn't that how betrayal always starts? Slowly, from inside the house. That evening, I drove to the old base chapel. The door creaked, a soft groan as I stepped inside. Candles flickered near the altar. I wasn't there to pray. I wasn't sure I even knew how anymore. But I needed the silence. The light from the stained glass windows spilled over the pews, fracturing into blues and golds. I sat down, burying my head in my hands. When I finally looked up, I saw a small plaque near the front, dedicated to those who serve in truth. I smiled faintly. Truth. That's what this was really about. Not revenge. Not orders. Just truth. My phone buzzed, shattering the stillness. A message from Captain Brooks at the Pentagon. Received your memo image. Verified clearance code. Vance's authorization is real, but the operation itself doesn't exist in any active record. You're chasing a black project. Proceed with caution. A black project. That explained everything. And nothing. I texted back. If it doesn't exist, how do I find it? Her reply was instant. Find who wanted it erased. Follow the money. Always follow the money. I pocketed my phone and rose from the pew. Outside, the evening sun dipped low, washing the base in amber light. It hit the chapel's stained glass, scattering color across the floor. For a brief moment, it looked like the world was on fire. I took that as a sign. Tomorrow I drive to Houston, use the key card, and open box 47C. Whatever was inside would either set a family free or end my career for good. As I walked away, I caught my reflection in the chapel window, uniform sharp, eyes weary, jaw set. Somewhere behind that reflection, the girl I used to be, the orphan named Tessa, was watching. She didn't look afraid anymore. She looked ready. The drive to Houston took 4 hours, but it felt like an eternity. The highway stretched on, a ribbon of faded silver under the relentless sun, and my thoughts raced ahead of me, a whirlwind of possibilities and dread. The key card Matthews had given me lay on the passenger seat, its chipped plastic catching the light, winking, daring me to use it. As I crossed into the city limits, the skyline rose from the heat haze, all glass and cold ambition. Somewhere beneath those gleaming towers, in a forgotten basement or warehouse, the truth waited, sealed inside a box marked 47C. Matthews's hastily scribbled address led me to a nondescript industrial building on the south side, surrounded by a chain-link fence. A faded sign, Federal Logistics Storage Facility. No guards, no cameras, just a keypad and an oppressive sense that this place hadn't seen daylight in years. I swiped the keycard. The green light blinked. A soft click. The lock yielded. Inside, the air was stale, heavy with the scent of cardboard and metal dust. Rows of shelves stretched into shadow, each one stacked with identical gray boxes, marked with cryptic code numbers. My footsteps echoed softly, the only sound in that cavernous space. Box 47C. I walked past 43, 44, 45. Then I saw it, on a lower shelf, 47. My hands shook as I pulled the heavy box free. I set it on a table, peeled off the seal, and carefully opened it. Inside were hundreds of folders, files labeled with initials, dates, locations, disaster relief, refugee transfers, special custody cases. But one file was different, thinner, newer, marked with a single red line across the top. ID 217L, FEMA relocation. I opened it, my breath catching in my throat. The first page, a birth record. Female, approximate age 6, no last name. Found outside Waco, Texas. Transferred to St. Mary's orphanage. Subject exhibits signs of memory loss, possible trauma. And at the bottom, under remarks, authorized relocation to Houston foster system under directive HVTEX OPS. I flipped through the rest. A single photograph fluttered out. A little girl with curly brown hair and pale blue eyes, clutching a toy bear. Lily. Emily. My heart squeezed. The next document was chilling. A psychological assessment, stamped classified. It described the child as adaptable, high-functioning, with stable temperament. As if she were a scientific subject, not a missing person. Then, a list of names, agencies, handwritten notations. Transfer complete. Case closed. And at the very end, stapled to the back, a signature I hadn't seen before. Authorized by L.C. Vance. I stared at it, my heart hammering. Proof. Actual, undeniable proof. I took photos of every page, slipped Lily's photo into my jacket pocket, and left the rest untouched. I closed the box, about to leave, when a faint metallic click made me freeze. A door latch. I turned. A man stood in the entrance, silhouetted by the afternoon sun. Late 40s, neat suit, crew cut. His expression was cold. Major Collins, he said smoothly. You shouldn't be here. My hand went to my ID instinctively. Who are you? He stepped forward, holding up a badge. Department of Defense Security. Name's Callahan. You accessed a restricted facility using an invalid keycard. Invalid? I asked carefully. Retired clearance. Belonged to Colonel Matthews, who, by the way, is now under federal review for unauthorized disclosures. I swallowed hard. You're with Vance, aren't you? His lips twitched, a barely perceptible smirk. Let's just say I answer to people above your pay grade. He extended a hand. Hand me the file. Not going to happen. His eyes narrowed. You're making a mistake, Major. That file is sealed for a reason. I know, I said, my voice low and steady. Because it's evidence of a crime. He took a step closer. You think the system will side with you? You're one officer against the Pentagon. I've been outnumbered before. He sighed, a patronizing sound. You Marines, always so noble, so willing to die for truth, even when it buries you. Before he could reach me, I backed away towards the far wall, my right hand hovering near my pocket where my phone was recording every second. Touch me, and that recording hits 10 inboxes. He froze. The corner of his mouth twitched, half a smirk, half pure irritation. You don't understand what you've opened? Then explain it to me. But he didn't. He just turned and walked out, the door slamming behind him. I stood there in the echoing silence, my pulse thrumming in my ears. Whatever this was, I just stepped into a war no one wanted to admit existed. I drove straight to a quiet diner on the outskirts of town, parked where I could see the highway, and transferred every photo from my phone to the cloud. Copies went to Captain Brooks, and one to a private, encrypted drive I used on deployments. Then I ordered black coffee and sat there, the pieces clicking into place. Vance's authorization, Matthews's fear, Callahan's warning. It all fit. A pipeline of secret relocations, cloaked in national security. But Emily wasn't a spy. She wasn't a witness. She was a child. My phone buzzed again. An unknown number. Collins, I answered. Major, this is Detective Ramos. Houston PD. Captain Brooks gave me your contact. His voice was rough, steady, the voice of someone who'd seen too much. She says you might need a pair of eyes down here. I do, I said. How do you feel about digging up old ghosts? He chuckled. I work homicide. That's half my job. I gave him a brief summary. The missing girl, the file, the federal interference. He didn't flinch. I can pull the orphanage closure reports from that year, he said. Maybe we'll find a name that slipped through the cracks. Thank you, Detective. One thing, Major, he added. If you're right about this, and this Vance character really has that kind of reach, don't go anywhere alone. I glanced at my rearview mirror, half expecting to see Callahan's car. Nothing but trucks and sunlight. I'll be fine, I said. Every soldier says that, Ramos replied. And every ghost does, too. That night, I checked into a cheap motel outside Katy. I didn't trust base lodging, not after that stunt at the facility. The sheets smelled like detergent and dust. The AC rattled, but it was anonymous. I set the photo of Lily on the nightstand and stared at it for a long time. That smile, the curls, the innocence. What kind of man takes that away? Outside, the hum of the highway blended with the soft crackle of distant thunder. I thought about the general, about the day he'd find out his daughter wasn't dead, just hidden. The look in his eyes when he finally saw her again. If she was still alive, I'd find her. And if the man who took her was still breathing, well, that would be a different kind of justice. I turned off the lamp, the room fading to darkness, and whispered into the quiet. Hold on, Lily. I'm coming. By morning, I'd memorized every document I'd photographed, every name, every code. That red line stamped across the file. Authorized by L.C. Vance. It burned in my mind like an open wound. The motel coffee was weak and bitter, but it kept me moving. Detective Ramos met me in the parking lot. A tall man in a plain brown jacket, with the posture of someone who'd seen his own share of patrols. Major Collins, he said, shaking my hand. You've stirred up a hornet's nest. I managed a small, tired smile. Story of my life. He opened a folder. I went through the archives you mentioned. St. Mary's was part of a foster system audit in 2007. 6 kids were listed as transferred to Houston, but only 5 arrived. One name missing from the log, Lily Carter. I exhaled, a long, shaky breath. That's her. That's Emily Alden. Ramos nodded grimly. Here's the kicker. The transfer was signed by a deputy coordinator, Harold Vance. An internal document. Never meant for public record. So he used his military credentials to move a child off the grid. I finished. And then erased her. We drove to Matthews's house that afternoon. The front blinds were drawn tight. No movement. I knocked twice. No answer. The third time, the door creaked open a few inches. Colonel Matthews. I called out. Silence. Ramos drew his weapon, motioning for me to stand back. We entered cautiously. The house smelled of stale bourbon and old smoke. A lamp was knocked over, a picture frame shattered on the floor. Matthews was slumped in his chair, head tilted, a bottle still clutched in his hand. An empty pill container lay on the table. I knelt beside him. No pulse. Ramos swore softly. Suicide. Maybe, I said. But look. Pinned to Matthews's shirt pocket was a note. For shaky words. I tried to warn you. At the precinct, Ramos's contacts processed the scene. The official story would say overdose. But both of us knew better. Someone had gotten to him first. I left Houston that night, my hands gripping the wheel hard enough to ache. Matthews's death changed everything. Now it wasn't just about a missing girl. It was about silencing anyone who got too close. When I got back to Fort Hood, I went straight to the general's quarters. The guard at the gate let me through without question. He was in his study when I entered, still in uniform, tie loosened, that same haunted look in his eyes. Matthews is dead, I said quietly. He froze, the glass of whiskey halfway to his lips. How? Pills. But I think it was staged. He left a note. Alden slowly set the glass down, his hands trembling. Vance, he whispered. Sir, he knows we're close. I think he sent someone after the files. You're not safe here. He gave a faint, weary smile. Major, I stopped being safe 20 years ago. I took the photo of Lily/Emily from my jacket and laid it on his desk. I found this in the Houston archive. There's proof of the relocation. Vance's signature. He stared at it for a long, agonizing moment. Then his hand went to his face, covering his eyes. I heard a sound I hadn't heard from him before, a low, broken sob. When he finally looked up, tears streaked his weathered face. My God, she's alive. We can't be sure yet, I said softly. But the trail's warm. He nodded slowly, pulling himself back together, a soldier regaining his composure. Then we follow it. Where does it lead? Vance, I said simply. All the way to D.C. 2 days later, we landed at Andrews Air Force Base, officially under the guise of a logistics audit. The general had enough clearance to keep us off the radar, but secrecy in Washington is like fog. It looks solid until you try to grasp it. Captain Brooks met us outside the Pentagon. You two are insane, she said, pushing her sunglasses up. You realize what happens if you accuse an undersecretary without hard proof. I've got proof, I told her. A signed authorization of death. 20 years of silence. She sighed. Then I hope you got more than that. Because Vance has friends who can erase you before breakfast. We don't need his friends, the general said evenly, his voice like cold steel. We just need 5 minutes in his office. We got those 5 minutes. Barely. Vance's office was immaculate. Flag behind the desk. Framed commendations. The faint, omnipresent hum of power in the air. He looked up as we entered, recognition flickering briefly in his sharp, gray eyes. Robert, he said smoothly. I was told you retired. Not yet, Alden replied. I had a few loose ends. Vance's gaze shifted to me. And who is this? Major Sarah Collins, I said evenly. U.S. Marine Corps. I think we've met, at least on paper. He smiled faintly. I doubt it. What can I do for you, Major? I slid the photo of Lily across his desk. You can start by explaining this. His eyes flicked down just for a second. Pretty girl, he said, his tone casual, dismissive. What about her? She was relocated under your directive. Code HVTXOPS. He leaned back, his lips curling into something that wasn't quite a smile, more a sneer. That program was classified. You have no authority to access those files. I have all the authority I need. I shot back, my voice firm. She was a child, not a classified asset. Vance's jaw tightened. You have no idea what you're meddling with. The world isn't black and white, Major. Sometimes we bury things for a reason. Then let's unbury them. He stood, towering over his desk. You think you can threaten me? You'll be stripped of your commission before the week's out. The general rose, his voice low, but full of steel. Try it. But know this, Harold. If my daughter's name is anywhere in your files, I'll drag you before Congress myself. For the first time, the mask slipped. A raw flash of fear, or was it guilt, crossed Vance's face. You can't prove anything. Alden smiled faintly. That's the thing about men who hide behind secrets. Eventually, someone like her, he nodded towards me, shines a light. Vance's voice dropped to a hiss. You don't know what you're starting. I met his gaze squarely. Yes, I do. I'm starting justice. We walked out before he could answer. Outside, the afternoon sun blazed across the marble steps, bright enough to sting the eyes. The general stopped, took a deep, shuddering breath, and said quietly, he's cracking. He knows it's over. Not yet, sir, I replied. But soon. That night, back at the temporary quarters, sleep was a distant dream. My phone buzzed at 2:01 a.m. An unknown number. If you want to find the girl, go to Lake Charles, Louisiana. Ask for Lily Carter. Don't tell Alden. Don't tell anyone. I stared at the screen, heart pounding a frantic rhythm. It could be a trap. Or it could be the lead we'd been praying for. Either way, I was going. I left before dawn, driving south on the empty highway, the first light of morning chasing my taillights. I didn't tell the general. I didn't tell Brooks or Ramos. Whoever sent that message knew where to find me. And that meant time wasn't on my side. The air grew heavier as I crossed into Louisiana, the world softening into fog and pine bayous, glimmering under the sunrise like sheets of glass. It didn't feel like I was driving toward danger. It felt like I was driving towards something sacred, something that had waited too long. The address led to a small, lakeside town called Moss Bluff. Quiet, almost forgotten. I parked near the old dock, where the water lapped lazily against weathered posts. Across the road stood a white wooden house with a crooked mailbox. The name on it stopped me cold, Carter. I walked up the path and knocked. The door opened a few inches. A woman in her late 40s peered out, tired eyes but a kind face, wearing a faded floral robe. "Can I help you?" I hesitated. "Ma'am, I'm looking for someone named Lily Carter." She froze, her hand tightening on the doorframe. "Who's asking?" "My name is Major Sarah Collins, U.S. Marine Corps." I paused. I knew her when she was a little girl. Her expression softened slightly, suspicion giving way to cautious curiosity. She opened the door wider. "Come in." The living room smelled of lemon polish and old wood. Pictures lined the walls. Birthdays, holidays, a smiling young woman with light brown curls and eyes the color of a sky after rain. Lily. Older now, maybe 18 or 19, but unmistakably the same face from the photo in my pocket. "She's at work," Mrs. Carter said quietly. "Community hospital, just outside town." "Who are you to her?" "Someone who's been searching a long time," I replied. Mrs. Carter sat down slowly. "You're not the first. A man came by last year. Said he was a lawyer from Washington. Asked questions about her adoption." She sighed. Lily didn't want to talk to him. My throat tightened. "Did he leave a name?" "No, but he scared her." I exhaled. "Then I'll do my best not to." Mrs. Carter studied me for a long moment. "You look like a woman who's seen too much and still hasn't stopped fighting." "I've had practice," I said softly. She gave a faint smile. "Then maybe it's good you came. Lily's different. Always has been. Nightmares when she was little. Couldn't remember her early years. Said she dreamed about men in uniforms, about a big house with a flag outside." My chest tightened. "She remembers." Mrs. Carter nodded. "She just doesn't know why. The hospital sat at the edge of town, small, plain. The kind of place where everyone knows everyone." I walked in, asked the receptionist for Lily Carter. She pointed me to the physical therapy wing. When I saw her, my breath caught. She was standing by the window, sunlight in her hair, helping an older veteran through balance exercises. Her voice was calm, steady, professional, but radiating warmth. When the session ended, I approached slowly. "Lily!" She turned, curious. Up close, it was undeniable. The eyes, the soft jawline, the exact features from the portrait in the general's office. "My name's Sarah Collins," I said quietly. "I knew you once, when you were little." She tilted her head, uncertain. "I'm sorry, I don't remember you." "That's okay," I said. "There's a lot you weren't supposed to remember." Something flickered behind her eyes. Fear, then recognition. "What do you mean?" I reached into my jacket and handed her the photo, the one from the Houston file. "That's you." She stared at it for a long time, her hands trembling. "Where did you get this?" "It was part of a classified government record. A relocation file. You were taken from your real family when you were 6 years old." She shook her head, a desperate, disbelieving gesture. No, that can't be." I took a deep breath. "Your real name is Emily Alden. Your father's a retired Marine general. He's been looking for you for nearly 20 years. Her breath hitched. "That's impossible." "I wish it were." Tears welled in her eyes. "I don't remember any of that." "You wouldn't. They erased it, but the pieces are still there. The nightmares, the flag, the uniforms." She pressed a hand to her mouth, eyes unfocused. "Sometimes I see a man's face in my dreams. Silver hair, blue eyes. He's always calling me Emmy. I thought I made it up." I swallowed hard. "You didn't." We sat on a bench outside, overlooking the lake. The air was still, the water perfectly smooth. She stared at the horizon, her voice trembling. "Why would anyone do that to a child?" "Power," I said simply. "Your father uncovered something that threatened the wrong people. They couldn't touch him, so they took what he loved most." She turned to me, her eyes shining with a mixture of pain and dawning understanding. "And you? How did you find me?" I smiled faintly, by refusing to stop. She gave a watery laugh. "You sound like a Marine." "I am." "Then you know what it's like," she whispered. "To lose people. And keep going anyway." "Yes," I said softly. "But you didn't just survive, Emily. You built a life. You help people heal. That's strength they can't take away." She nodded slowly, tears now running freely down her face. "I want to see him," she said. "My father." I pulled out my phone. "He'll be on the next flight." When General Alden arrived that evening, I waited near the lake while Lily, now Emily, stood on the dock, hands clasped tightly. He walked toward her, stiff at first, a soldier facing his own ghost. Emily! His voice cracked on the name, a sound of raw emotion. She turned. For a heartbeat, they just stared. Years of pain, hope, and disbelief colliding in a breathless silence. Then she ran. She ran to him, and he caught her, held her like he was afraid she'd vanish again. His shoulders shook, his metals glinting in the dying light. I looked everywhere, he whispered, his voice thick with tears. Everywhere. I know, she sobbed, burying her face in his shoulder. I always knew. I turned away, giving them the privacy they deserved. The sun slipped behind the trees, turning the water to gold. Sometimes, justice doesn't roar. Sometimes, it whispers, like the wind across a lake, reminding you that peace doesn't come from victory. It comes from truth. Later, as we stood by the car, Alden placed a hand on my shoulder. Major, I have no words. You don't need them, sir. He nodded, his eyes wet but clear. Vance is still in Washington. But I have everything we need now. Files, recordings, testimony. The truth's coming out. He smiled faintly. Then let me handle the politics. You've done enough, sir. I don't think any of us are done, I said quietly. Not yet. The wind off the lake carried the faint laughter of father and daughter behind us. For the first time in years, it sounded like healing. The following weeks unfolded like a strange dream, part triumph, part reckoning. The headlines hit first. Undersecretary Harold Vance resigns amid federal probe. Then came the leaks, the internal memos, the classified transfers, the testimonies. I watched the news one night from the small living room of my on-base quarters, coffee growing cold in my hands, as an anchor spoke the words I'd waited 2 decades for someone to say. Vance is accused of authorizing the abduction and relocation of a minor, the daughter of then Major General Robert Alden, in retaliation for an internal corruption investigation. For the first time, the nation heard what had been whispered in shadows. For the first time, Emily's name, her real name, was spoken out loud, not as a missing child, but as a survivor. When I visited the Aldens home a week later, the house felt lighter. There were new photos on the mantel. Emily and her father at the lake, smiling with the tentative joy of people relearning each other's faces. The general opened the door himself, his posture straighter, his eyes softer. Major Collins, he said, his voice full of warmth. Come in. There's someone waiting for you. Emily was sitting in the sunroom, sketching. When she saw me, she stood quickly, setting her notebook aside. You really came, she said, a wide smile spreading across her face. I promised, I replied. She laughed, a sound that hadn't even existed the first time I met her by that lake. You know, every night since, I've tried to remember more, and sometimes I do. Pieces. The smell of the bass. The sound of engines. My mother's voice. It's like the world is giving them back to me, one by one. That's how healing works, I said quietly. Memory doesn't return all at once. It rebuilds itself, like muscle after a wound. She nodded, wiping at her eyes. I still can't believe anyone would go to all that trouble to hide me. I looked toward the general, who was now smiling softly. Power has always feared innocence, I said, but it underestimated Marines. He chuckled. It usually does. A month later, I was called to D.C. to testify before a Senate committee. The hearing room was packed with press and officials, all pretending not to be nervous. I sat in my uniform, ribbons sharp against the dark blue fabric, as senators asked their questions. Major Collins, one of them began, why did you continue investigating after your superior officers told you to stand down? I met his gaze, unflinching. Because a little girl's life mattered more than my career. The room went utterly silent. Somewhere behind me, a Marine guard subtly shifted his stance, a quiet sign of respect. Another senator leaned forward. Would you do it again? In a heartbeat, I said. Because justice doesn't serve the system. It serves people. When it was over, I stepped outside into the bright spring air. The Capitol dome gleamed like something reborn. I looked up and whispered, Semper Fidelis. Always faithful. Not just to command, but to conscience. That evening, an unexpected package arrived, no return address. Inside, a single envelope and a folded note. The note read, For Major Collins, you reminded me that truth has a cost, but also a purpose. Inside the envelope was a silver pendant, the kind issued to children at St. Mary's Orphanage long ago. On the back, engraved in small letters, EA 2006. Emily's initials. I smiled. Maybe she'd found it among her things. Maybe she just wanted me to have something to remember this by. Either way, it felt like a full circle. Weeks turned to months. The investigation widened. Vance's allies fell one by one. Each indictment another small victory for those who still believed honor could outlive politics. I returned to duty, but requested reassignment. Paperwork and command desks didn't suit me anymore. I transferred to a veterans outreach division, helping young Marines transition home. It wasn't glamorous, but it was honest work. Every now and then, I get a letter from Emily, or rather, Lily Emily Carter Alden as she signed it now. She'd stayed in Louisiana for a while, working at the hospital, but was planning to start nursing school. Her last letter ended with, "You once told me truth deserves daylight, even if it burns. I think you were right, but sunlight also heals." I kept that one pinned above my desk. One summer evening, General Alden invited me back to Texas. The airfield shimmered in the heat as I stepped out of the car. He was waiting by the hangar, wearing civilian clothes for once, looking 10 years younger. "Emily's inside," he said. "She wanted to show you something." Inside the hangar, a restored training aircraft gleamed under the lights. On its side, painted in neat script, were 3 words, "Honor line for Sarah." I froze. She wanted to name it after what she calls the line that connects all of us, the general said quietly. The line between duty and mercy. Between truth and power. Emily climbed down from the cockpit, grinning. "We're calling it the Honor Line Project. Dad's helping me get veterans involved in aviation rehab therapy. You helped us both find something worth building again." For a long moment, I couldn't speak. Then I just hugged her. A simple, human gesture that said everything words couldn't. That night, as I drove back to base, I pulled over near the old memorial wall. The stars were bright above the Texas sky, and for the first time in a long time, I didn't feel haunted by ghosts. I thought of Matthews, of Brooks, of Ramos, of everyone who'd risked something to make truth matter. I thought of Emily's laughter by the lake, and I realized something profound. Revenge had never been the point. It had only been the spark that lit the path toward redemption. Justice didn't look like vengeance. It looked like a father holding his daughter again. It looked like a survivor choosing to forgive a world that had forgotten her. And for me, it looked like peace. If you've listened this far, if you've walked with me through the storms, the silence, and the fight for truth, then maybe you understand what I've learned. We can't always undo what's been broken, but we can stand for what's right. Even when no one's watching. Even when it costs us everything. Because sometimes, the smallest act, opening a forgotten box, asking an inconvenient question, refusing to look away, can bring light to places that have been dark for far too long. So, wherever you are tonight, remember this. Honor isn't about the medals we wear. It's about the promises we keep. Have you ever faced a moment where your conscience clashed with command? What did you do? Tell me in the comments below. I really want to hear your stories.